Mr. Moore, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Professor Shoemaker, let me just get this fact straight about your background. You are a professor of history and legal studies, is that correct, at the University of Wisconsin-Madison?
That's correct.
Does that make you about the most liberal person in America? Is there someone more liberal than a person on the campus in the liberal arts school?
Mr. Moore, is there a question?
Let me ask you about the...
It's actually not a liberal arts college.
Let me ask you about the outrage and disgrace of what happened in Madison this past winter. Were you there to observe the goings-on?
Yes.
In that time? So let me ask you this question. According to news reports that are very credible, there were the schools throughout the state of Wisconsin, especially in Milwaukee, had to be shut down by several days because the teachers were protesting in Madison. Can I ask you this question? How is that putting children first?
As far as I understand it, in some school districts in Milwaukee and Madison, there were school closures for as many as 2 and 3 days. Yes.
So basically these teachers were putting their union ahead of the kids?
No, actually they were taking great risks to themselves professionally, since there have been some repercussions for those who did, but they were doing it because they really believe in the quality of education that's currently offered in Wisconsin, and they're desperate to hold on to it.
So you don't think the kids were harmed by the fact that they didn't have school those days?
The kids were probably delighted.
Well, let me ask you this question then. You've been a big defender of collective bargaining. Is that right? And that was one of the major, obviously, issues of contention in the protests about whether the public employee union should have collective bargaining. Let me ask you this question. If you've got a situation where you have a Democratic mayor or a Democratic city council that was essentially elected predominantly with public employee union money, and that mayor or city council member is sitting at the negotiating table across the table from the public sector employee union representative, can you honestly say that you think that elected official is going to act on the behalf of the teachers, of the public employee unions, or the taxpayers who pay the salaries? What is your honest opinion of that? And remember, sir, you are under oath.
While I believe that all human institutions, whether private or public, are susceptible to all kinds of fallibility, I believe that people try to arise and do their duty.
Well, let me ask the question differently. In that kind of situation, who at the bargaining table is representing the interest of the taxpayer, not the union?
What's being bargained for? When
you have a democratically elected public official who was elected with public employee union money, who, when that negotiation on the salaries and benefits of those union workers, who's representing the taxpayer's interest?
As opposed to those representatives who are there.
Well, you can't have a negotiation. My point is, sir, you can't have a negotiation if both sides are on the side of the union.
If that were
Isn't that the point that Republicans
Professor, would you like the question read back?
I think I understand what he's so inartfully trying to ask.
Well, Professor, we need to answer the question, because this is Mr. Moore's last question.
Let me ask you another question, because there's much I want to put you under the microscope on. I want to ask you this question. Are you familiar with the fact that last year when they had a budget crunch in the city of Milwaukee, that what had to happen was that the city had to fire, because of union work rules, the city had to fire the teacher of the year? And what private sector institution would ever fire their best worker? You don't have to answer the question. I think, don't you think that his silence is deafening on that question? Let me ask you one last thing, if I may.
One last question,
sir.
Mr.
Are you, as everyone knows, especially the members of the jury, the members of the legislature, the number of them, I think 10 or 11 members of the state senate in Wisconsin walked out and fled to Illinois. Are you proud of those actions?
The number is 14.
14, okay. I knew you would know the number. So do you think that was a justifiable action to just flee the state and not act as to do their job and act as a representative of the state?
I look forward to when the voters in their districts either affirm what they did or complain. But I suspect, given what I know of the landscape there, they're getting a lot of support from their constituents.
And so that's what it has come to, that the Democratic Party is so beholden now.
Save those
to the public
comments for your closing
unions.
argument.
This is the
please.
question. True or false, that the Democrats are now so beholden to the public employee unions that they simply walk out on their job?
False.
No. Okay.
Thank you,
I rest my case.
Professor. You may be excused. Okay. Do you have any more witnesses, Counselor?
I call Dr. Spencer Pack to the stand.
Dr. Pack, will you swear on this copy of the New York Times to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I don't think I can swear on the New York Times. I'm sorry. I cannot do that.
Just on your own goodwill.
I will. Thank you.
The court will stipulate he'll tell the truth.
Dr. Pack, state your name and occupation.
I'm Spencer Pack. I'm professor of economics at Connecticut College in New London, Connecticut.
And what are your educational credentials and relevant work experience to this trial today?
I have a BA in social theory from Franconia College in New Hampshire, a master's in political theory from the University of Toronto, PhD in economics, mathematical economics, and political economy from the University of New Hampshire.
So in your view, Dr. Pack, as an economist, can you tell me what would be the impact on economic growth if tomorrow we unilaterally eliminated all public sector unions, collective bargaining rights, and abrogated pension and health care obligations for public sector workers and retirees? What would be the impact on the U.S. economy?
In the first place, it would demoralize people at this conference, I would think, in denying the freedom for workers, public workers, to join unions. So it would be incredibly demoralizing. In the second place, to be firing people in times of massive unemployment would be a terrific mistake. In the third place, in the global economy that we have now, where we need more teachers and more education, to be firing teachers and wrecking the educational system more would be a terrible mistake.
Would that close state and local budget gaps, do you think, if we were to fire a lot of public sector workers and reduce their pensions and health care unilaterally?
No, the problem with the deficits is the recession that's been going on for years. We have 9.2% official unemployment rate. Many more people are underemployed or discouraged. When you have this kind of unemployment, government revenues will go down to the extent that there's a safety net to help common people on Main Street. Expenditures will go up. That's the cause of the deficit. We will have these deficits as long as we have 9.1% or more unemployment. That's not going away under these policies.
Last question, Ms. Lee.
Dr. Pack, can the U.S. compete internationally in the 21st century in the global economy without investing in infrastructure, education, and the skills of our workforce?
Obviously not, and even with that, it's hard to see how we're going to be able to keep or to compete internationally when there's low-wage economies coming onto the market, and we have a bipartisan consensus to have outsourcing, free trade, wage arbitrage. Wage arbitrage means when the wages are higher in one country, such as the United States, and lower in other countries, such as India and China, the tendency for the wages in the United States is to go down, and that's where we're looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pack. No further questions at this time.
Mr. Moore?
Sir, is it your contention, by the way, you're a professor at what school?
Connecticut College in New London, Connecticut.
So you actually may be more liberal than this gentleman here.
I think I'm probably the most liberal person in this room.
Okay, I'm glad that we.
I want to say how I was invited here. On the one hand, is a mystery to me, and on the other hand, I'd like to thank
Objection
Mark
is
Scusen for
sustained.
inviting
Sir,
me.
we're very pleased that you are here, and I'm mostly
Line of
pleased.
questioning is not pertinent.
Let me ask you this question: is it your contention that to be a good teacher, you have to be a member of a public employee union?
It's my contention that in America, a free country, people, if they want to form unions, they should have the freedom to do it.
Oh, okay.
This is not 1975. This is not Santiago, Chile. This is not Pinochet.
Okay. Let me ask you this question.
These
sir.
are people in
Okay, I get
favor
it.
of freedom.
Let me ask you this question then. I don't think you would contend that we have many teachers in America that teach in private schools, correct? And the vast majority of those teachers are not members of unions. Would you agree with that?
Yes or no?
Yes or no? That teachers in private schools are generally, like Catholic schools, are generally not members of unions.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, we have a system of public schools
Right.
and private schools in America, and we've had that system for a long time.
And it's your contention, if I understand what you just said earlier, was that these high salaries for these teachers and these high benefits inure to the benefit of the school system and the kids. And my question to you is, why is it that in the private sector and, say, Catholic schools, the teachers are paid significantly lower, and yet the test results, the graduation results are significantly higher in the private schools with non-unionized teachers than the public schools?
I don't think any teachers are highly paid. I don't think any teachers are highly paid. The people that are highly paid and too highly paid are on Wall Street. Those are the people that are highly paid.
Answer the
not
question.
Main Street.
Wall
Street.
Let me ask you another question, because you brought up a very important principle. I think you said that freedom, right? That you said that teachers and firefighters and policemen and women should have the right to form a union if they want. Is that a fair summation of what you said?
In the land of America, in a land
Yes
of
or no,
liberty,
Professor?
equality, fraternity,
of
course.
So you do think that they should have the right to choose this union if they want to have a union. Is that your point?
My point is, if they want to be in a union, they have the freedom
Okay, let
to be
me
in a
ask you this
union.
question, sir. Does that mean then that you would support what many Republican governors around the country want to do, which is create right-to-work laws, so that every single worker in America has the right to join a union or not join a union? Isn't that a basic civil right of every American worker?
The question here,
Mr. Moore, save your speeches for closing. Please ask your witness.
the question here is,
Do you
should people
support
who
right-to-work
join unions go to jail? That's the question.
No, it's not.
No, that's the
That is
prosecution,
not the
right?
question.
Professor,
Should people
please.
who join unions go to jail?
If I want to work for the police department in my local government, or I want to become a teacher in the public schools, should I be forced to join a union and pay those union dues?
Overruled.
It's not factual.
Overruled. Counselor, final question.
Should I be required?
You are
Do you
not
think
required.
it's a basic civil right of mine to have the fundamental individual right of joining that union or not joining that union?
I think workers in America should have the fundamental right to join a union if they want to.
Or not to?
Whether or not they want to or not, as far as a free right to work state, each state should be able to decide that on its own. I would anticipate New Hampshire would decide one way, other states would decide another way. Each state should have the right
But you
for that
agree
decision.
that there are hundreds of thousands of workers in America who are forced to join a union
Okay,
and
objection,
forced to pay the union dues,
objection.
even though they don't want to.
Objection.
Counselor,
Nobody in America is forced to join a union.
Yes, sir. How could they not be forced to join a union? You've got over half.
Order in the court, please.
I'll save that for my closing
Okay.
statement.
Now, we're going to skip or rebuttal, and we're going to go right into our closing statements because we're running out of time in this wonderful situation of jurisprudence. Now, we will conclude the court proceedings with the closing statements to the jury, Mr. Moore, and then second, the defense. I understand Professor Shoemaker will also be making a closing statement. Is that right?
Yes.
All right.
Members of the jury, members of the audience, I think that what we have here is what we call a slam dunk case for the prosecution. And let's just review some of the evidence that we've heard. We've heard the evidence that public sector employee unions are paid a very large premium for being members of that union. That those premiums can be 30%, 50%, in some cases 100% higher than what a private sector worker receives. And there is a basic unfairness here. Liberals love to talk about the concept of fairness. How is it fair that the janitor or the plumber or the roofer in America who lives down the street from a public employee union has to pay taxes, earns less money and has to pay taxes to pay for these inflated salaries, benefits, health benefits, and so on that worker does not get themselves. I would make the case to you that that is unfair and that's hurting the economy. Second of all, you heard evidence that these states and municipal governments, unions have created a situation now through collective bargaining where states and municipalities are facing a $1.5 to $3 trillion unfunded liability. And I would ask this question when you deliberate on this: where do you think the money is going to come from to pay for those exorbitant unfunded liabilities? I will tell you the answer. They will come from two sources. Either one, we are going to have to radically cut the kinds of public services that we all care about. It means we're going to have to cut school funding. It means we're going to have to cut our police and parks and firefighters, and we'll have to close the prisons, and we'll have to do that because of these exorbitant kinds of employee benefits and retirement benefits that are simply unaffordable, and they're a direct result of forced unionism in the public sector. We've also heard that we've seen evidence that teachers walk out on their students to protect their government employee benefits. Is that putting children first? I would make the case to you that is not. We cannot go forward in America with public employee unions bankrupting every state and city in America. You heard the evidence, ladies and gentlemen, about what is happening in California. I would make the case to you that the fiscal problems in California are the canary in the coal mine. Unless we do something about these enormous benefits that are paid to public employee unions in America, we are going to see the kind of California fiscal crisis hit Maine, hit New Hampshire, hit Florida, hit Texas, hit Nevada. Every state and city in America is not going to be able to pay their bills, and the very important public services we rely on are going to be put in jeopardy, or else the alternative to that, and I think this is the alternative the public sector unions want, is to double and in some cases triple the taxes on American workers to pay for these benefits. Ladies and gentlemen, the sham has got to come to an end, and I urge you to come back with a guilty verdict. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Professor Shoemaker.
Gold-plated benefits, the new haves. We hear all of this rhetoric, but the numbers simply don't back it up. In the last couple of months alone, one U.S. senator has twice publicly claimed that